Good morning. This is Monday morning. I sure am glad to be with you. And I looked outside, and you know what I know? The snow is still there. I'm hoping within the next day or two, maybe most of it will be gone. But I'm not holding my breath for that, I can tell you. But nonetheless, it's a wonderful day, and I sure am glad to be able to spend a few minutes with you. And I hope the time today will be a blessing and profitable for you. I did see today that our temperature is supposed to get up to 48, which for an old Florida boy, that's still not very warm. But we're looking forward to a little bit break in the weather, and then it's going to turn cold again. And then I believe we're going to get some really nice weather. But that's all up to the Lord, what He does with the weather. It's His decision and His choice. And so we'll just trust Him for it. But I am glad that you're listening today, and I hope that our time today will be a blessing to you. And today we're going to be talking about something. We've been talking kind of about prayer and asking God, those kind of things. And today I'm going to speak on this subject: ask anyway. You know, have you ever heard somebody say this? Well, it can't hurt to ask. You just say, well, I know what the answer is going to be, but it can't hurt to ask. You know, the Bible says you have not because you ask not. And boy, how true that is. But my point today is sometimes all we can do is ask anyway. You know, we're not sure what God is going to do, but we can ask Him anyway. And so that's what we want to do. And I'll talk about that today. Our text today is going to be found in Second Samuel chapter 2. 2 Samuel chapter 2. You know, there's an interesting thing in the Bible. So often this happens. You have two books with the same name, First Samuel, Second Samuel. And many times people get them mixed up. In First Samuel chapter 12, it is the story of Samuel praying for the people. And he said, God forbid that I should not pray for you. But he said, I will teach you. And he goes on with that. And he prayed for them. And I thought that was wonderful. Then in Acts, 2 Samuel chapter 12, we find David praying for something personally, not just for the people, but personally. And then this is the passage we're going to be using today. So I hope that you'll kind of stay with us, and perhaps the Lord will give us something that will be a blessing and a help and an encouragement to us. The another thing that I want to say about that particular prayer is God doesn't always give us the answer we want. Sometimes He does. And sometimes it's like He moves mountains to do what we've asked Him to do. But sometimes it's not His will. And sometimes it's not what He is going to do. But I like what David said. I just pray anyway. And so we'll see that here in a few minutes. You stay with us. I heard about two old men that were talking one day and sitting on a park bench, and they were talking. And as old men do, they talked about their life. They talked about their home, talked about different things. And one of them said, you know, he said, man, I wish my wife would cook more of the things I like. She used to. He said, she knows everything I like. And she used to cook all my favorite foods at different times. He said, man, it was just wonderful. And he said, now everything she cooks is healthy and tasteless. And he said, man, I just wish she would cook something I like. The other man said, oh, no. He said, man, my wife, she cooks for me like I was a god. The first man said, what? He said, oh, yeah. I said, I'm telling you, she cooks for me like I was a god. He said, when she brings me the meal, it's like a sacrifice. He said, what do you mean it's like a sacrifice? He said, it's a burnt offering. Well, I'm glad that's not the way my wife cooks for me. I can tell you that. Oh, my. But in Second Samuel, we have a story. Now, let me set the stage for it just a little bit. You remember that David did not go to war when it was time for kings to go to battle. David stayed back at his palace. And while David was staying at his palace, he went out and he looked off the balcony and he saw on the roof of a house close to him that there was a beautiful woman there, Bathsheba. And David sent a servant to bring her to the castle. And David committed adultery with Bathsheba. And then Bathsheba, a few weeks later, came and said she was pregnant. And then David started with all of this. Okay, what can I do? I've got to cover this up. Rather than admit it and go on, he decided to cover it up. And you remember, he brought her husband Uriah the Hittite, who was one of David's mighty men, brought Uriah home, said, man, Uriah, you're doing a great job. I appreciate you, man. God bless you. Go home, see your wife, and before you go back to the battle. Well, Uriah wouldn't do it. So then David got Uriah drunk on purpose, thinking that in his drunkenness, then he would go home. But again, he wouldn't do it. He had too much character. He said, how can I do this thing when my companions are in the battle? I can't come home and rest and visit with my wife when they can't see theirs. So he wouldn't do it. So David sent a message to Joab. And he said, Joab, I want you to put Uriah right up in the front of the battle, the heat of the battle. And at the hottest time of the battle, you withdraw, leave Uriah up there to die. And Joab did it. And Uriah died in the battle because of what David said to do. So here's David. He commits adultery with Bathsheba, Uriah's wife. Then he has Uriah killed. And then he brings Bathsheba into the castle to be with him. He thought he had covered it up. But there's only one problem. God knew it. And God sends Nathan the prophet into David and tells the story and all. And this is where we are. And after he had told all that had happened, Nathan tells this to David. Now, therefore, the sword shall never depart from thine house, because thou hast despised me. This is what the Lord said. And hast taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be thy wife. Thus saith the Lord, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house. And I will take thy wives before thine eyes and give them unto thy neighbor. And he shall lie with thy wives in the sight of the sun. For thou didst it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun. And David said unto Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said unto David, the Lord also hath put away thy sin. Thou shalt not die. Now notice, when David confessed his sin, Nathan said, David, God hears you. And he's not going to kill you. He's put it away. But he's not through. In verse 14, howbeit, because by this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme, the child also that is born unto thee shall surely die. And Nathan departed unto his house, and the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bare unto David, and it was very sick. David therefore besought the Lord for the child, and David fasted and went in and lay all night upon the earth. And the elders of his house arose and went to him to raise him up from the earth, but he would not, neither did he eat bread with them. And it came to pass on the seventh day, David has been lying on that earth, fasting, praying, asking God to do something to spare that child for 7 days. And it came to pass on the seventh day that the child died. And the servants of David feared to tell him that the child was dead. For they said, Behold, while the child was yet alive, we spake unto him, and he would not hearken unto our voice. How will he then vex himself if we tell him the child is dead? What are they saying? They saying, if this is what David did while the child was alive, will he kill himself? What's he going to do to himself when the child is dead? But when David saw his servants whispered, David perceived that the child was dead. Therefore David said unto his servants, Is the child dead? And they said, He is dead. Then David arose up from the earth and washed and anointed himself and changed his apparel and came in to the house of the Lord and worshiped. Then he came to his own house. And when he required, they set bread before him, and he did eat. Then said his servants unto him, they can't figure this out. Then said his servants, What thing is this that thou hast done? Thou did fast and weep for the child while it was alive. But when the child was dead, thou didst rise up and eat bread. And he said, While the child was yet alive, I fasted and wept. For I said, Who can tell whether God will be gracious to me that the child may live? But now he is dead. Therefore, wherefore should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. And David comforted Bathsheba his wife, and went in unto her, lay with her, and she bare a son. And he called his name Solomon, and the Lord loved him. The Lord loved Solomon. This is one of the sad pages in the life of David, and probably the saddest in his life. David had committed adultery, had Uriah killed, now deals with the judgment of God. There are several things that happened in this passage that I think are so relative to all of us. David had kind of covered up his sin, but when Nathan came in, he told the story of a very rich man who had many sheep. But he had a poor neighbor who had just one little ewe lamb. That's all he had, just one. Well, some guests were coming to the rich man's house, and so he went out and he took the one ewe from his poor neighbor, killed it, and prepared a feast for his guests. And he took the only little lamb that neighbor had. David got so angry. He said, You tell me who it is. He said, I'll kill him before nightfall. I'll take care of him. And then Nathan looked at David and he said, David, thou art the man. Uriah had one ewe lamb, one little wife. That's all he had, one wife. David, you have a palace. And he said, the Lord said, David, if that wasn't enough for you, I'd have given you more. But that wasn't okay with you. You took what did not belong to you, and then you killed Uriah. And he lays out for David the things that are going to happen. He told him, he said, you're going to have trouble in your own house. And not only that, you're going to have trouble in the kingdom. And the baby is going to die. Now, let me just remind you. Amnon, David's son, raped his sister Tamar, destroyed Tamar. Absalom got so angry because David did not discipline Amnon that Absalom killed his half-brother Amnon because of what he did to Absalom's sister Tamar. Then not only did that happen, not only was Tamar destroyed and never, by the way, had a normal life after what had happened to her. Not only that, but then Absalom split the kingdom, and even tried to kill his own father. And when Absalom died, David wept for his son. I've heard a lot of people preach on that, but what they forget is this one thing. David knew the reason Absalom was dead because of David's sin. Amnon dead. Absalom dead. Tamar destroyed. The baby dead. And now here David is. And so in this setting, with the consequences laid out before him, the sword will never leave your house. And he said, the baby is going to die. David was so distraught. The Bible says that he went in and he laid himself on the earth and he fasted for 7 days. 7 days. And then when the baby died, they come in, David, the baby's dead. David gets up, washes, bathes himself, changes his clothes, gets all ready, goes into the sanctuary and worships God. And then he comes out and asks for them to set a table for him and bring him food. They said, David, we don't understand this. How could you do this? Several years ago, when I was pastoring in Georgia, we had a man by the name of Ron Gearis come to our church. Brother Ron was the president of Rock of Ages prison ministry at the time. He preached 2 messages in our missions conference that as long as I live, I will never forget them. One of them was on the story of the feeding of the 5,000. When Jesus asked Philip, he said, Philip, where shall we buy meat that we may feed all these people? Where can we buy the bread for them? How can we do that? And the Bible says that Jesus asked Philip that to prove Philip. Because the next verse says, for he himself knew what he would do. Jesus wasn't asking Philip for an answer. He knew what he was going to do. And the second message he preached that week that I'll never forget was a message entitled, Who Can Tell? And it was on this story. Because when the servants came to David and they saw him all cleaned up, washed, worshiping, eating, they said, David, you fasted and prayed for 7 days while the child was dying. And now that the child is dead, what is this? And David said, who can tell whether the Lord would be gracious to me and spare the baby? Who could tell? I don't know, but I prayed anyway because it's God's doings. Listen, we need to understand David had a heart. David understood this more than anything else. He understood that God can do anything. And if God chose to spare the baby, he could have. And David laid his heart out before the Lord. But when the baby died, David goes into the house of the Lord and he worshiped. Why did he worship after the baby died? 2 things I want you to note very carefully. Number 1, David understood that the Lord makes no mistakes. God was right. David was wrong. God was right. The second thing he gives them is in the verse that he says, but now he is dead. Verse 23, now he is dead. Wherefore should I fast? Can I bring him back again from the dead? Is what he's saying. No. He said, I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. You know what David was saying? He was rejoicing in the Lord because there was something after this life. I'm going to see my baby again. God made a way. And so here we are at this time, and we look at ourselves and we see problems and issues and things in life. We wonder, Lord, what is going to happen? I want you to understand. You ask anyway. Say, well, God will not hear that. Well, ask anyway. And you trust him because his answer is always right. And David said, God is right. What amazing thought. I think sometimes we quit praying when we ought to be praying, because the prayer is not only for the thing we're praying for, but the prayer is also for us. Because our talking with God, our speaking with him draws us closer to him. And when God did not give David what he wanted, but he gave David what he promised, David said, you're right. And the judge of all the earth does right. But there's a better day coming. One of these days, people that we have prayed for through the years who have already passed on. There are a lot of people we prayed for when they were sick. Lord, if you would, you could heal them. But he didn't. But so many of those people, one of these days, we're going to see them again. They cannot come to us, but we're going to them. Who can tell what God's going to do? Just trust him and keep on praying. God bless you today. I hope you'll join with us in the morning, same time, right here. God bless you today is my prayer.